Tantra, plant medicine, esoteric hermeticism, there is a huge revival for these things because they are archetypally aligned with the times that we're coming into. What Tantra does, you started by asking about the deities, is a question that sometimes comes up: are they external or are they just archetypal? The answer is both. And I don't hold any punches back anymore. I have no time to squabble about this. There are other worlds and other dimensions and other beings, for sure. Okay, I was trained as a scientist. I know what that sounds like. For the example, in Tibetan Buddhism, it's clear that there are other celestial agencies and other deities and other divinities, but there are also very malevolent forces too. Okay, and just as we are willing to say inside our own psyche, there is darkness and there is light. Externally, it's just a mirror.
Welcome back to the transmission, my friends. Perhaps you've noticed something is stirring across the globe. Something is probably also stirring inside of you. And I'm going to cut right to the mythopoetic meat of it. I think it's the symptoms of a global initiation or transformation. Said symptoms are constellating in just countless ways, ecological collapse, technological revolutions, geopolitical upheaval, war. Our identities are in flux in a multitude of ways. A collective obsession, a personal obsession in my case, with visitations from unknown intelligences, unknown life forms. And I don't think this is just schizo cherry picking on my part. I really think a new myth is starting to emerge, as does our guest in this one, psychologist and longtime initiate of Tibetan Buddhism, Dr. Miles Neale. I love riffing with Miles because he's, one, just incredibly human and humble, yet he speaks from this profound place of wisdom and mythopoetic fluency. He also does just that in his new book, Return with Elixir. Links for Return with Elixir and Miles and Third Eye Drops will be in the description. Do me a kindness, my friends. Like, subscribe, comment, share if you'd be so kind. Do subscribe to Third Eye Drops wherever you listen to audio podcasts. By the way, we've got hundreds of mind melds with some really brilliant beings, including multiple with Miles. And considerable announcement, I guess. We've now got YouTube memberships, meaning there are going to be 2 pieces of members-only content published every month. I've already posted a dream analysis with another Jung head, another mythopoetically dipped friend, Eric Godzi, of a particularly novel and honestly disturbing dream. I will resist the temptation to riff on it here, but do check it out in the members section. And if you are a Patreon patron, worry not, you will also get access to the very same content. And depending on your pledge level, you can also get rewards like stickers, pins, shirts, and more. We've also got a patron-only Discord that I frequent, along with hundreds of other members. Would love to riff with you there, of course, and I may try to find a way to roll that into the YouTube membership as well. It's a little clunky. Anyway, would love to riff with you there, but presently, let's do so with Dr. Miles Neale. It seems like one of the core themes that is like a central column in this whole thing is the topic of initiation, right? Like, what does that mean on a multitude of levels? And I know you explore a lot of those in the book specifically, though I haven't read the whole thing yet. But man, it's such a rich topic because I think as soon as you start talking about it, as soon as you identify it, it's one of those things that almost everybody will universally be like, yes, shit, we are bereft of this. And it's so key to, personal evolution, personal development, self-understanding, individuation, spiritual growth, all of these concepts that we know are so important, elusive, nebulous. And that's one of the reasons I think this book's going to be important, because it's going to bring that more into focus, what that means personally, what that means archetypally, what that means collectively. And yeah, I mean, I guess just to start, if people are seeking initiation, what would your first piece of advice be to them?
The fact is that as a civilization, we're being initiated. So you don't have to look too hard. Okay.
That's true.
That's the number one thing about the book, is that it is both a reflection of the larger, broader civilizational crossover that we're amidst. And then it is a roadmap for personal, individual freedom, awakening. So, you don't have to go too far. Just open your eyes. You don't have to travel on pilgrimage to be initiated. You just have to read the tea leaves, or the stars, or the synchronicities. You have to look a little closer, and what you'll find there is opportunities. This is, without any doubt, the most impactful moment in centuries. And everyone I've talked to, and every prophecy I've read, every astrologer I've engaged, is very clear on that. Surprisingly so, because I know everybody believes that their generation witnesses the biggest,
Right.
most impactful. But when I talk to people that I really, really admire and who are really dialed into their particular discipline, what we are living through right now has not been witnessed before. I'm thinking in the broadest, most large scale models of cosmology, for example. There are people that I really respect, like Pam Gregory, who is 45 years astrologer, one of the leading astrologers and voices. Very grounded person. She says she looks back in a record, she never has not seen anything like what we're actually, like, to this day, venturing through. And if you're pedestrian, in the public, you're not esoteric minded, you're not spiritual minded, and you're just looking at or feeling. I mean, just forget looking, just feeling the absolute acceleration of time, the absolute bewilderment in shift.
Yeah.
It is unprecedented. I mean, you take one small example of, like, Trump in office and what he's done in 60 days, and you stagger for words, you stutter and sputter for words, and that's just one little tiny pinprick of the entire mosaic.
Yeah.
You look at developments in technology, in AI now. You look at energy systems. You look at people on the cusp of the spiritual revolution who are talking about all kinds of different innovations, and you can sense that we are amidst an unimaginable quantum leap.
Yeah.
And all of that has been borne out of at least the last 4 or 5 years of slow collapse. And so what more do you want as a context for initiation than the pressures of your world collapsing and the inkling, the dawning of new possibility? That is the telltale sign. That's the telltale sign of reaching the end of one civilization and having just the audacity to claim that you might be part of the first generation who forays into a brave new world.
Yeah, man. Yeah, there's so many, like, key things that I think it's important to address in this conversation so that this isn't nebulous. And I think one of the ideas is, it's not just a Jungian idea. I think it's an idea that goes by many names and has gone by many names throughout the ages, but it's essentially this idea of zeitgeists and spirits of times, right? That it's clear that there's this, like, archetypal energy present in every time. And it's a lot easier to, I think, recognize in hindsight, right? Because it's completed. You can see it with 2020 vision. You know what the key moments were, and then you can do any number of kinds of analyses from there. But when you're in it, you're feeling the energy, right? Like, we're feeling the goddamn pneuma, vital energy, explosion, transformation, transmutation, whatever you want to call it. But while you're in it and it's like blowing your astral hair back, it's just like you're just holding on. You're just trying to make sense of it. You're just trying to sense make, right?
Yeah.
And
Unless
all
you've
of
been
these things.
prepared. Unless you've been prepared.
Yeah, and I would love to hear what you even mean by that. I mean, I feel like I'm holding on for dear life in a lot of ways, but one of the things that, all those things you just mentioned, there's this Jungian again idea of those things, those qualities, those archetypal factors in the collective unconscious constellating within certain individuals, certain events, certain you know, turnings of society that look like, okay, now everything is going to be different forever because of COVID, because of this president, because of, you name the thing. And when you're looking at all of these things with an archetypal view, you can ask these deeper questions of like, what is constellating within that person? What is constellating within that event? And then that starts to actually give you some directionality on those whatever I said, astral hair blowing back sorts of questions that make you just feel like, I don't know what the hell is going on. You can actually start to have some idea of what's going on when you start looking with an archetypal lens. And there's so many other things, dude. Like there's so many things I've been wanting to bring up, to you in various contexts of this conversation, but I'm going to leave it there because I've been rambling for too long.
Oh, I mean, just a minute there, I said, unless you're prepared, and you're an example. You're an example. I mean, you're gifted with a plethora. First, you have inclination, and then you've been a student. You've been a scholar of the mystic traditions. You've looked in beyond the superficial level. You're equipped with a mythopoetic or archetypal worldview, and that is extraordinary. That separates you right away from the general public, and it allows you to filter and interpret and play and create stories and to see yourself in a different kind of context. I mean, how we see the world matters so much more than we give it credit. We take for granted that things are just the way they are. Most people are absolutely traumatized right now. I mean, most people just are living with the convergence of inflation and geopolitical strife and presidential elections and the turn towards populism and towards whatever geopolitical stirrings and musings there are. Most people are just hanging on for dear life, hoping that they can, make it through, and have been treading water and holding their breath ever since the pandemic portal opened. Those that have the worldview of mythopoetic, those that have some access to cosmology and see the large narrative arc, those that have some spiritual basis, they're seeing a different unfolding here. They're seeing a different world. And there is a kind of crossroads or decision tree. There are multiple dimensions of reality that exist simultaneously. So there's a whole segment of the population that will be caught, ensnared in survival instinct. And there will be another population that see this as a great catapult, that are actually moving. I'm not saying that they're not bewildered, because that's universal, but on the other hand, it's like, if you know how to surf, you can catch a wave.
Yeah.
You can catch a wave depending how skilled you are. There's a huge set of tsunamic waves happening right now. Many, many people are getting tossed about. Yeah. Others have exercised the ability to learn how to ride some of this and see a different outcome, see a different picture. They're actually on the vanguard of reimagining what's possible, which is a creative energy. It's a different chakra. There's energy that's not bound in root survival. There's energy in that chakra. The energy is free to create. Now, I'm not suggesting that those people also don't have their moments.
Yeah.
Right? But I look at you, I look at how you spend your time, the world that you're creating, your microcosm, allows you to reimagine the same news headlines and the same scenarios and the same events and same global circumstance and craft out of it something much more meaningful. And more importantly, we should look at the energy underlying it. Are you the kind
Yeah.
of person that's having trouble getting out of bed right now? Or are you finding your way? And I look at your channel, and I said this before we started, and I've known you long enough for me to see you every incremental year growing more into who you have been, who you're meant to be, is a testament to the mystery initiations you have already accepted.
Thank you,
And now
brother.
we're talking about a catalytic moment in which this is not just information anymore. This is in your gut. This is in your DNA. You're living
Yeah.
this stuff. And I'm not
Yeah.
pretending that you're so evolved, Michael, that you never stumble. But I'm saying you because in your world you're just you, relative to where you were 5 years ago, and relative to the person on the everyday person. You're an accelerant of your
Well,
acorn.
yeah, thank you, man. I mean, to be clear, I absolutely still feel like a neophyte in philosophical and spiritual matters and my own individuation and finding my own true north and doing anything but the most roundabout, zigzaggy, you know, path toward that whatever that luminous thing off in the distance is. But I want to go and thank you, but I also have to be like, man, I don't feel like any different of a person really from 5 years ago. I do kind of feel like I've dissolved into this, like what I'm doing, to a point where some of those dissonant elements of what I was doing before have just fallen off, like obviously my old day job and whatever. But before I disappear into my own fucking boring biography, um or before this conversation gets taken over by that, I want to revisit something, accentuate something that you said before, which is that looking archetypally gives you the context to understand yourself and what is going on within the zeitgeist. And I think I would zoom in on that even further and say that having that wisdom allows you to tell a better story, and then being able to tell a better story gives you a much better context, right? Like whatever your mythopoetic lens that you, at the end of the day, it's a choice, right? Because we don't know like what the ultimate metaphysical truth of anything really is. Um, but if you have a lot of lenses at your disposal and you're able to craft a sort of artistic narrative that also comports with reality well enough, then you are deeply contextualized and you have sense making directionality. And I think that's what a lot of what you're doing with your work in general does for people. It gives them the tools to not just tell like a mythopoetic story, but see the archetypal truth in it and in themselves. Like it's a different kind of truth than is going to be yielded with like scientific, materialistic measuring devices. But I would argue that it's imaginally true in another way, like maybe in like the um, who is he, the one who would Henri Corbin, like the mundus imaginalis type of way that Jung would talk about too, that like the imaginal is different but just as real as the corporeal physical. And the tools that you wield and that you talk about and that you use in your practice, I think give people access to that imaginal realm, that archetypal realm, in a way that they didn't previously have.
Yeah, you're talking about dissolve and then reconstitute. And the words that
Yeah.
you just used, the ones that are really key right now are the creative.
Mm.
I mean, there's nothing more valuable than creativity right now. But in order to wield creativity, you have to have some prerequisites. And so that dissolving part is the letting go of one reality, one very narrow, limited worldview.
Mm-hmm.
In Buddhism, this is called emptiness. Emptiness is the foundation for Tantra. So emptiness allows you to see the fluid nature of reality, that nothing is as it appears. When you have the wisdom eye, what they call a third eye open, you see that things are not as rigid as they appear. It gives you flexibility. And then from the point of view of flexibility, you can add the mythopoetic, you can add the imaginal, you can add the heart-centered, you can add the embodied, you can add the long range. And suddenly you can be in the driver's seat of co-creation. I'm not saying creation, I'm saying co-creation, because it's never from one point. But these words that you're using, I mean, they're so key to where we are. They're so key because we can see the world dissolving. We can see that the structures, the bedrock, the institutions, and the paradigm itself, it's fragmenting. So this is where the solvated coagula is so key. It was the central thematic loom upon which I wove the Elixir tapestry. Yeah. So the book Return with the Elixir is a culling together of 4 threads. Cosmology, the largest view of the dance of the 24,000-year great year cycle. Joseph Campbell's mythopoetic of initiation and dark night of the soul and return. Jung and his ability to accept the unconscious as an ally on the pilgrimage of wholeness, and the Tibetan Tantras, which are a subset of the altruistic spirit of Buddhism, chiefly designed to recreate, to use imagination and to use the natural technology of creative capacity of the human being to generate worlds.
Wow.
All of them share, and what I discovered in this 5-year journey is that all of them share this unifying pilgrimage of solvated coagula. They all share this. And then if I had another 5 years, I imagine I could venture into different disciplines, another 6 disciplines,
right? For
and
sure,
find this unifying theme, which is a process of melting down, which involves surrender, which involves grief, which involves loss, which involves disorientation, which involves bewilderment, but which also, if trained, involves freedom and opportunity and lightness and flexibility and adaptability and discovery and awe.
Yeah.
All, they come together on that side of the arc. And then on the other side of the arc is integration, creation, revolution, rebuilding, reimagining, and coming into a new. And they're all talking about that in different ways, but they're all essentially saying the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if we look at the world through that lens, first of all, there's not as much fear. And that's so critical, because if you
start... How so?
Okay. I mean, let's look at it, and you just look at, like, I don't want to get away from the day to day of people's sense that there are tectonic shifts underfoot that are destabilizing them. Okay, and name any 3 or 4 of them just to make it practical. I mean, inflation and joblessness and AI coming in and unimaginable amounts of uncertainty about the future, and the geopolitical strife between nations, and the return of consideration of nuclear war, and climate disaster, and you name it. And any one of them in a lifetime would be destabilizing enough. But what we have is a convergence of what, I don't know who called it, but it's such a apt descriptor, the polycrisis. We are amidst a polycrisis.
I just want to exemplify this with one mundane fact that I saw earlier today. That is, it's as tragic as it is hilarious. It's that you can now basically finance purchases that you made on DoorDash so that you don't have to pay for your food right away. Like you could basically like put your cheesy gordita crunch from Taco Bell on credit, and if that doesn't just exemplify
Wow.
the fuckedness that's
Yeah.
so, and there's so many just terrifying statistics that go along with what percentage of the American population is living paycheck to paycheck, or in 5-figure, 6-figure debt, whatever. It's just so weird because some, like, these numbers that we hear don't really drive those facts home. It's like you can look at a number and be like, oh, unemployment doesn't look too bad, or like wages don't look too bad. But then you look at things like that, like the levels of debt, the horrifyingly like onion level like humor of something that just it completely exemplifies like late stage capitalism, like that idea of having to put your like your McDouble on credit or whatever is just, yeah.
Well, you're laughing because there's an absurdity to it,
Oh yeah.
but actually, we both know that if you dig a little deeper, there's an insidious and very dark underbelly to that reality. Like
Oh
that
yeah.
is just a pimple that is filled with pus at the surface, but there's a deep illness underneath that. Okay, and so part of the dissolving is the dissolving of our delusion, and what we get to see is a revelation. It's an apocalypse. It's a revelation. And actually, what we're seeing and what we're witnessing and what we can't run from any longer is just the corrosive underbelly that underpins the civilization that we're living in. And
Yeah.
so, okay, so this is exactly what I'm talking about. I want to make this really clear. Whatever example you put on the table, under the microscope of the third eye analysis, what we can uncover is darkness, is a confrontation with the psyche underneath it, a civilizational underbelly, a grotesque civilizational underbelly awaits us on the first pass of this labyrinth
Yeah.
maneuver. And this is the initiation here. This is the beginning of the initiation. Actually, we're walking our way very slowly. It starts with the symptom. You pick any number of them, and this, puts your enchilada on debit.
Yeah.
Is okay. That your mind called that forth, and we could just laugh, sort of awkwardly laugh over it, or we can go deeper into it. And what you find if you scratch the surface of this or any number of these symptoms is that we've been living upon an edifice of very dark, insidious greed, corruption, malice. I don't know who the actors are. We can spin our wheels about that. And I don't think that's a useful amount of our time, but I also don't think it's useful just to jump over it. I think it's more useful to go deep into the bus sack, go deeper into it. And actually, there's something very mythopoetic about even doing that. And I'd encourage people who are listening to do this: is take the one thing that you're upset about, take the one thing that you're beating your chest about, take the one thing that feels unfair, take the one thing that feels scary, take the one thing that feels like it takes your breath away and that you're stilted or stalled out in paralysis. And instead of trying to seek comfort around it, go deeper into it.
Mm-hmm.
And see there what it has to teach you.
Yeah.
So what if you just go further into this debt thing? What you find there is that, for example, the banking institutions are at its most exceedingly skilled, manipulative, unjust, and corrupt. And you can do that at every node in the web, whether it be big agra, big pharma, government, medicine, energy, every single technology and every single sector. You can see the symptom of it reaching its apex, having disenfranchised vast swaths of human beings, having betrayed the people whom they are supposed to serve. They are now just pawns in a chess game or a monopoly game where they serve the interest of the few. And we are beginning to see that. And the great revolutions that we were seeing, the people's movements across the planet, are an example of how once you start to get a inkling of the gross underbelly, you're finally met with people's resistance.
Yeah.
And this is part of the Aquarian movement. This is part of the sea change, is that the powers that be that have enjoyed and grown fat on deliberately engineering manipulative tactics that keep them in power are starting to face the first round of resistance at the very same time. And what this does is the more people see, the more people become empowered.
Yeah.
And so it's by confronting the darkness that actually you find your empowerment.
Yeah.
Now, can you get rid of the powers that be are going to double down? There's no guarantee that you're going to win this. Especially with AI, there's no guarantee that the good is going to prevail. I'm not one of those naive, idealized people. But what I do think is the deeper you go, the more you will discover. And there will be a moment where what it is that you are discovering is that you have left yourself out. You have lost touch with your ability to participate with this.
Yeah.
Your ability to see this in a different way is the beginning, is the gateway to the new arc. That you have, that the fact that you've been disempowered, disenfranchised, immobilized, rendered a zombie, rendered a junkie. Yes, that's all part of the dissolving and dying arc. The moment you realize amidst that, the edifice of this structure is the beginning of the possibility of reclaiming something that's vital to the new movement.
Yeah.
And there's an acorn here. I think I want to spell it out and then turn it over to you to get your thought on it. But there's this idea that in the problem, within the cave, there's also the solution and no other place. That metaphor, that archetype, is so critical to us now. It's so critical to us now. Because what happens is that you get a sniff of the problems and you start outsourcing your power, looking for another solution out there. A government, a new leadership is going to save me. A new Messiah is going to save me. The aliens are going to save me. AI is going to save me.
Yeah.
You haven't done enough exploration if that's where your mind is going.
Yeah. Speaking of getting a sniff and uncovering the dark underbelly, I do have to stop and do an ad break for Wendy's, because wouldn't that be the best ad? And it may happen. I mean, I don't control what YouTube ads get thrown in here, but man, that would be like the most perfect trickster twist. But anyway, yeah, man, I couldn't agree more with what you're saying about this idea. That it's such a core idea to the Campbellian ethos, the Jungian ethos, that on essentially every possible level, from the most real and practical level to the most like abstract mythopoetic level, it's all about going where you're afraid to look. It's all about, the dragon that dwells in the deepest, darkest cave. And I think that what it's clear what that means practically, right? Like whatever this big looming thing that you're afraid to do is, whether it's, if that thing is related to the personal evolution that really speaks to you, that is a dragon that must be slain. If it's a skill you have to learn, if it's a whatever it is, like, yeah, there's your practical level. But I think on the more mythopoetic levels of that, it becomes unclear what it is, what that means, what our role in it is as human beings. Because like let's take some of these, let's take some more like esoteric or metaphysical ideas and throw them in to this conversation. Like, what does that mean from the perspective of like understanding ourselves in the context of, maybe we shouldn't go here, because you did such a good job of pointing out that constantly finger pointing and blaming things outside of yourself is really not going to help you. And yeah, I mean, let's acknowledge first of all that people are in a whole range of unjust, not ideal situations that are out of their control, right?
Yeah, but
I totally want to acknowledge
they
that.
remain unjust. They remain unjust by the finger
Yeah.
pointing. Okay. And what I mean by that is what we see, especially this is Jung. Okay. This is one of the things that I really admire about Jung's reframe, is that everything is an opportunity on display for us to learn from. So you don't like Trump's narcissism, or you don't like Biden's senility. Instead of pointing the finger out there, you start to see what it's teaching you about what's inside of you. You don't like the corruption out there. You don't like the division out there. You don't like the insidious underbelly out there. You don't like the greed and how unfair it is out there. You are initiated to start to take radical responsibility for what you see out there, and you start to look inside yourself for the corrosive elements, for the greed, for the bias, for the division. And then actually what you see out there is not destroying you. What it's doing is alerting you to what remains. And I can give you a very personal example. My 5-year journey, one of the main things that the pilgrimage of Salve et Coagula was helping me uncover and metabolize was my relentless and very deep pursuit for validation, driven by a very deep and insidious insecurity. And I look back on the edifice of the construction of my first 25 years of the arc of my career, and the successes and the milestones I have, I don't take away from myself, but I look at them honestly and I see, at least in part, what they were driven by was a deep, deep desire to be seen and to be recognized and to be validated.
Yeah.
And behind closed doors, there was a lot of stress around that, of achievement and pushing and hoping and positioning. And when I failed, or when it didn't work, or when I didn't get the dopamine hit, there was a retracting into a really familiar place of insecurity amidst these cosmological wheels and diagrams and musings of Jung and the Buddha and Tantric methodology. There's also this vulnerable story of me in real time walking through the pandemic gates, winding up in Bali. And for many years, you and I have conversed over this time period in real time, having to confront the dark night of the soul of my own insecurities. And the one word around about year 3 that really succinctly captured it was my irrelevance. Now, when I start talking about a daily confronting or a daily metabolizing of my irrelevance, what most people who care about me do is they want to pat me on the back and take that away. They want to say, oh no, your work is so profound. It's so meaningful. You've helped so many people. You've changed my life. What are they trying to do, Michael?
I mean, I don't want to say that they're trying to just completely patronize you, but I think that they're trying to console you. I think that they're trying to help you have a different perspective. But I think what you're getting at is they're ultimately keeping you from confronting whatever it is underneath that feeling that is causing that thing to show itself in your own psyche.
And they're actually preventing
Yeah.
preventing me from doing what my soul, not my head, my logic,
Mhm.
needs me to do. I mean, I'm someone who enjoyed a nice platform in New York at the stage of Tibet House. I'm someone who I found a niche. I found great colleagues, great mentors, had a beautiful wife, two wonderful children. Like I had the picture perfect as far as my own Polaroid snapshot. Once I passed through the pandemic gates and I left it all behind, it was very painful, not for a week or a month. There were days, weeks, months where there was no phone calls, no opportunities, no dopamine hits, no reminders of the old world. It was desolate
Mhm.
and there was no way to hide. And in the midst of that, I had to challenge some deep-seated narratives about how important I really felt like I needed to be
Yeah.
and wasn't finding it. And the people that want to pat you on the back and make you and remind you that you are important or significant, what they don't see is that the significant side of your contribution is only half the story. You are also irrelevant. You are also invisible. You are
Mm.
also, for every ounce of vitality, you would also have another side of you where you're unvital and you don't make a contribution and you live a quiet existence. And there's actually there is some humility in there about being a human being.
And and
In a
and and I
very
think
grandiose world, there
yeah.
is a need for that dose that you are just a speck.
Yeah, and it points to one of those really uncomfortable core pieces of wisdom from Buddhism is that at the end of the day, there is no amount of making a difference that matters. There is no amount of like achievement or recognition or whatever you want to call it that ultimately is going to scratch that itch, right? Because you're always going to want more. You're always going to look at people who have more than you. You're always going to like measure your wonder why you still feel empty even though now you hit another benchmark and another benchmark and another benchmark, whether it's financial or followers or job title or whatever the fuck. It's always going to be there, and then you have to ask yourself, so what else is there aside from that? How do I scratch the itches aside from those itches? And I'm not saying that I've figured this out or that I don't play that game. I guess for me, it's like seeing one of the things I try to do every morning is remind myself that I whatever these endeavors are that I'm doing are a game that I'm playing, and it's not the game. And I don't know quite what to do about that because I still end up having to play the game and sink all my time and efforts into playing the game. But
Yeah,
um
if you go too far into the despair of your irrelevance, it will immobilize you, and then you don't make any
right,
contribution at all.
right.
That's like an existential abyss. You don't get to the place where you say, "Well, I'm so insignificant, why bother?" You don't get there. Or you may get there, you may feel that, but it doesn't become your new home. You go deeper even into that still. You stay in motion. You don't get trapped. You stay in motion and you find your way to this other current,
Mhm.
which is saying, based on the humility of your insignificance, you can still make a better contribution. it's
Right,
it's
right.
wild. It's like your contribution based on insecurity that masks arrayed as perfectionism, or masks arrayed as competency, or masks arrayed as grandiosity, that's showcase. It's fluff. And there's so much of that. That clogs the airways. Those that have had a real dark night of the soul and have come through and are understand that they of course have a contribution, but it's not their contribution. It's part of a larger contribution. It's not there to boost their ego. It's there to create something more meaningful. And yes, you can express yourself individually, but there's not a pillar of insecurity at the root anymore. And I remember this with my teacher. Geshe Tenzin Zopa is someone who through and through is vibrant in the world and creating worlds for other people, opportunities for other people. His whole life is about generating bliss, enthusiasm, positivity in order to help initiate people, into their creative potential and capacity. He travels around the world endlessly, has no permanent home. I get to meet up with him once or twice a year. I get to curate pilgrimages for him and with him. There was this time in Japan where I was reaching the, several years of working with this invisibility. And really what it is about being willing to accept that I wasn't ever going to be a teacher of some repute. I wasn't going to be what I thought I was meant to be. The acorn that I thought I was going to develop into it wasn't about me having a platform and speaking and teaching and writing books, which is all the things I had prepared and sacrificed for 25 years, Michael. It's like if you're a gymnast and you go when you're a young tyke, you play baseball and you do little league and then you graduate to college and then you expect to play in the major leagues. If you're a musician, you work diligently for decades to get to that stage. And I was at the tail end of really coming to terms with and accepting it's not going to happen for me because it's driven by the wrong impulse. And it will always feel dissatisfying, and it won't put forward the right foot into the world. And I was in Japan with him in a tantric enclave in the top of a mountain called Koyasan. It's a tantric mountain, a hermitage 1,000 years old. And I'm with my teacher in his room. And I was almost on the verge of tears. And I said, Geshe, it's not going to happen for me. All my life I was being prepared for something, and I'm not the teacher. I'm not the one. Everything I thought my life was meant for it's not for me. It's not going to happen. And I've pushed and I've pushed and I've pushed, and I've met so many points of dissatisfaction. And he said to me, wow, you're so free now.
Wow.
You're incredibly free. You see, you're not beholden to an institution. You don't have a platform. You don't have any apparatus on your shoulders. He said, you're so incredibly free. You can do whatever you want. Then he said this. He said, and the guru needs many hands. And then it was like, oh, you see, there is use for me, but it's not about me.
Right. Exactly.
There is a place for someone with my talent, my skill, my history, all my skill set. There is meaning to be made in a world of offering something. But the reflexive return of where it ends up landing isn't on me. And that frees me from the chase that you're describing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a powerful realization and a powerful share, man, because everybody obviously wants to project the most successful possible version, blemish-free version of themselves into public, right? And it's super rare for someone of your repute, of your status as a psychologist, as a teacher, to be so open about that. And I think that's super, super powerful, man. I do want to ask you, because I've become more curious about, you know, tantric, esoteric Buddhism, and we're going totally away from practical, like, relatable things here. But one of these ideas I wanted to ask you if this is part of your practice at all is this sort of devotional relationship with, like, they're called yidams, right? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, you dumb.
Um yeah, and so basically for people that don't know what this is, there's this practice in Tibetan Buddhist tradition where you create this relationship essentially with like an archetypal deity by, doing various rituals, by uh, doing various practices that you can tell me more about. And I don't want to immediately, abscond with this idea and roll it into what this is making me think of. So I'll let you speak to it first and describe what it really is, what it really entails, what the experience of it is like, and then we'll go from there.
The yidam are deities. The yidam is your personal deity of choice. And ultimately, the yidam is the deity you desire to become, to make the most
Mm,
maximal impact on the planet, on the sphere, on the dance of illusion. Knowing that it's an illusion, knowing yourself is an illusion, not taking yourself to be solid, not taking the deity to be solid, not taking the world to be solid, and yet still involving yourself in the art of creativity. The yidam is your most optimal reminder, tool, vehicle for making the most maximal impact on your inspiration and your altruistic impetus. And so you don't get to Tantra without having the foundations of what are called the three principal paths. In a nutshell, those three principal paths are transcendent renunciation, altruistic resolve, and quantum view of emptiness. You have to have these three
mm.
things. What each of
You
these
say,
things,
did you say
yeah,
quantum view of emptiness? Is that what you
yeah,
said?
that's a term that I came up with. It's a play on transcendent wisdom, what's called
Ah,
the wisdom realizing emptiness, what's sometimes called correct view. I call it the quantum view of emptiness.
hmm,
Uh, the three things in a nutshell are transcendent renunciation is not about giving up the world. It's about giving up the unconscious cycles of self-perpetuated trauma.
hmm.
You first have to master your trauma apparatus. You have to heal yourself. You have to see that trauma comes from you, not at you. You have to see that the world is coming from you, not at you. But first and foremost, you have to see that the victimhood stance is a choice.
Right.
Okay. Once you understand that, then anything that comes your way is grist for the mill, or what Jung would say, everything that comes your way is to help embolden you or awaken you.
Right.
It's the most radical perceptual shift, but it's still provisional. It's only foundational. But for most people, that would be a
Yeah.
liberation in it itself. And this is why I'm saying, from the people that are on the woke extreme or the MAGA extreme or whatever, caught in this binary, pointing finger scenario, they're not even in the spiritual conversation, because the spiritual conversation first and foremost asks you to take responsibility for the binds and the knots and the trauma habits that are creating your false perception or apprehension that the world is a scary place in which you have to create division and tribalism and all the rest of it, and point fingers and virtue signal or whatever else that you get caught up in, whatever fanciful, daydream that you misapprehend as reality. That's the first level. Second level is you have to get your motivation correct. And this is, after 25 years of doing what I did, it took me 5 years to get my, it took me 25 years to get my motivation really sincerely in the right place, by unbinding this centrifugal force around which the insecure me was driving my whole thing.
Hmm.
You know, it's when Geshe-la told me that, it wasn't an intellectual understanding. It was like, I could feel myself breathe,
Yeah.
that I did have a purpose. I did have a role, but I'm just a piece of a mosaic. And it felt liberating. He was saying, you're totally free, and the guru needs many hands. Come on board, work with me. We'll create worlds together, but it won't be about your insecurity, and it won't be about you. It's
Yeah.
it's the ultimate freedom. That's the second level. And the quantum view is that everything is a hallucination.
Hmm.
Once you know it's a hallucination, you can have a better dream.
Hmm.
Very
Is this what's meant, in the sort of, like there's the famous Heart Sutra thing of like the it's essentially like the dance between emptiness and form, right? It's this idea that the
emptiness
hallucination.
is form. Okay. It's not two things. They're the same thing. Once you realize that you have non-dual view, you have the Heart Sutra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Emptiness is none other than form, form is none other than emptiness.
Mhm. Mhm.
Then it goes into all the negations. No suffering, no path, no liberation, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind,
Yeah.
no path, no origination, no enlightenment. What's it saying? It's getting you to let go of all your constructive notions so that you can pierce the event horizon into actual nonverbal, nonlinear, non-conceptual, intuitive insight. It's
Yeah.
designed to be a Zen cane that whacks you into awakening.
Yeah.
Emptiness is form. It means that the play of reality that you're beholding and apprehending right now, if you see it correctly, it doesn't disappear. You just see it for what it is.
Right.
Okay, and now these three things, transcendent renunciation or the disruptive power of transforming your victim story into a heroic story, the altruism that replaces the egocentric chasing, and the quantum view, which allows you to navigate the embodied world with open eyes as a creator. These are provisional for Tantra. Tantra situates itself on top of those things as a power tool that allows you to generate tremendous amounts of psychic or embodied bliss, enthusiasm, creativity. I mean, it is one of its hallmarks is it's very embodied. I
Hmm.
mean, when I look at Geshe-la, my teacher, he is like a child. He's always giggling. He's always laughing. He's riding, you know, he's riding the supreme serotonin cocktail from his nervous system.
Wow.
And And what is it like to be around people like that? Well, this is why people can't get enough of him, because he shows us what we are capable of, how we could live in an optimized nervous system without the latest green juices and biohacking. Or maybe this is the supreme biohacking. I mean, maybe you can say that a tantric methodology is like a supreme biohacking to get the energies within your body so thoroughly aligned that they would support and maintain a view of reality as a dream, as a lucid dream, with you as a fighter pilot in a flight simulation designed for the ultimate mission of awakening and rebuilding an altruistic civilization from the ground up. So it's pivotal right now, Tantra.
Yeah.
All
Hmm.
these methodologies, Michael, by the way, not to digress, but Tantra, plant medicine, magic with a K, esoteric hermeticism, the revival of all these, and which is why your platform is blowing up, because you're a gateway keeper for all these conversations and technologies in the new emerging zeitgeist. As we head into the Aquarian age, there is a huge revival for these things because they are archetypally aligned with the times that we're coming into, the great renaissance and reset that we are amidst. Many more people will be opening their minds. Many more people will be heading into altruistic tendencies. Many more people will be re-engaging with practices and magic and energy work and revitalization of their central nervous system, getting more buoyant, getting lighter. And what Tantra does, you started by asking about the deities, is
Yeah.
The deities are, the question that sometimes comes up, are they external? Are they just archetypal? The answer is both. Okay, the answer is both. On the one hand, yes, we have to get ourselves more comfortable and more conversant, and I don't hold any punches back anymore. I have no time to squabble about this. There are other worlds and other dimensions and other beings, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I
Yeah.
was trained as a scientist. I know what that sounds like, but I don't hesitate anymore. There are other worlds. There are other dimensional beings. And they're not all benevolent. And we should be very, very careful who we're messing with. I mean, I can't tell you how many people have come back from the Amazon taking ayahuasca and encountering other beings that actually have invaded their mind and taken them to very, very dark places and misguided them in their messaging. That also happens. And we have to
sure.
we have to be really clear about that. There are, for example, in Tibetan Buddhism, it's clear that there are other celestial agencies and other deities and other divinities, but there are also very profound and powerful malevolent forces too. Okay. And just as we are willing to say inside our own psyche, there is darkness and there is light, externally, it's just a mirror. So there are other beings, for example, the Dalai Lama has forbidden the practice of a shukden. Shukden is a malevolent agency that for centuries, one of the Dalai Lamas in the stream of Dalai Lamas endorsed the practice of it. And then the 14th iteration of that Dalai Lama said, actually, that was a mistake. This agency has gotten out of control. It can really, really impact the quality of your mind, and it can actually make obstacles for people. Please stop. Please stop.
So, can you tell me more about this? Do you know much about this?
About Shukden?
Yeah. I haven't heard of this.
It's not something I ventured into because I respect the Dalai Lama's wishes, and it's not something I've not taken the initiation. Okay. And it's not a deity or not a force or a spirit or an agency that I have created an alliance or a relationship with. But that's what initiations do.
Is this in like the family of yidams? Is it a deva?
It's not a
yidam.
It's not a yidam.
Okay.
It's considered a protector, but it's actually a false protector.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's like kind of hierarchy, okay? Like just like in everything, like like in Rosicrucianism, there's a hierarchy of the angels or whatever.
Right.
Same thing. Same idea. Some of these agencies are lower level. They're more like guardian spirits or malevolent spirits. Some of them are deities or bodhisattvas, high level agencies. Like I remember I had him on my podcast. He was absolutely incredible. He died recently, Dr. Robert.
I was so shocked by that, by the way. I had no idea he was ill. I had no idea, I didn't know him well, but I had seen several podcasts with him throughout the years.
Incredible speaker and incredible wealth of knowledge and very multifaceted knowledge. And yeah, I was caught off guard by his demise and his passing, but he talked about these angels and their hierarchy and was very, what I liked about it was he was very open and frank, like that they exist. I mean, like we're not beholden to the materialistic, scientific, reductionistic paradigm anymore. Now, can there be a lot of
nuclear? Sorry to interrupt. Wasn't he like a nuclear physicist or?
Yeah, he had some military background training, and then he got into sacred geometry.
He had like a PhD though in some kind of like hard discipline. Yeah.
And here in Bali, it's the same thing. Okay, like this is an island where you can't hide from the spirit world. Here, it's in your face. Okay, I can't tell you how many. Okay, when they talk about expats who come here, they're called bule. Expats that come here, want to have a nice, comfortable expat life in the rice field, whatever, go surfing. Inevitably, very quickly, they learn that they're not alone here. That if they don't get on board with the fact that there are unseen beings intervening and intersecting in amidst and around them all the time, then they have a rude awakening and root shock, and a lot, and their path is very bumpy. You know, I have
Hmm.
friends and myself too. The first year of my wife and I on the island, uncanny paranormal phenomenon.
Really?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And you learn very quickly. You have to make quick alliances with the local Balyons, the local spirit guides and shamans and witch doctors, and you have to get very good about, you know, including ceremony to appease the right agencies and to tap the right frequencies and to get on and to learn how to live in harmony, because there's no abolishing them and there's no banishing them. You have to kind of invite them to the table and feed them and, you know, acknowledge them. And that's a very great Jungian. It's
Yeah.
very Jungian. Okay.
What were some of the things that happened, by the way?
Well, I mean, the obvious one is people get very, very sick.
Hmm.
Okay. And it's so deceptive because you're like, okay, I got diarrhea because whatever. But then that diarrhea then turns into a rash and it lasts 6 weeks, you know, and you get the right medicine, you do a full course of antibiotics and it persists, you know, and then it turns into something else in your house. And then it gets more paranormal that you start hearing things or furniture moving, or, you know, you have awful, awful fights with relations in which you trust, and things become very chaotic and break down. And the magnitude of these things can no longer be chalked up to coincidence. And then you finally break, and you finally break and you ask one of the local wisdom keepers, and they come to your house and they're seers. You know, just like, you know, feng shui in Hong Kong or in China, people get a read of the land. People, you know, I was going to buy a house, for example. I was going to buy a house in a particular rice field. It had a beautiful Balinese temple. It was, my wife and I saw it and instantly were like attracted to it.
Yeah.
But we had spent enough time on the island to know that we needed a consultation, right? So we brought in my guy, and instantly he's like, "Oh, you know, your driveway went right through a spirit tree and interrupted the energy of the spirit tree. And so you know, the very building of this house has meant that the spirits that live in that tree are offended.
Hmm.
You know, so your entry, your gateway into your house, and think about it in terms of archetypal imagery, your gateway, your entry into your own home is through spirits that have been hurt or injured or disrupted by you."
Yeah. Yeah.
And then he went further. He said there is one particular spirit that occupies your house. It's a generational or ancestral spirit. It's someone who died here. You know, and he said this house will never be sold.
Wow.
He owns this house. And my wife and I were desperate to have this house. You know, we had the money, we had the time, we had the resources, we had the contractor, we had all the things. But the minute that the shaman said, you know, you're not getting this house because it's already owned and it's not for sale,
Wow.
then a cascade of things happen where no matter how much money and no matter how much building permit and no matter how you know, contracts broke down, things broke down, became an impossible endeavor. You know, from the spirit world, it manifests into the literal world. I guess one of the things that I want to say is, for me, living in Bali, this is just their view. It's just as accepted as the scientific reductionistic paradigm of the scientist in our world. They never lost it. They never lost touch with these other agencies. They live amongst these other agencies. Part of their daily life is to maintain balance and relationship with these other agencies, calling in and appeasing the good ones, feeding the demons so that they are acknowledged and kept at bay. There is a sense of part of the ritual of life is to maintain harmony with this other world. And by the way, this is not just Bali. There are bastions of indigenous cultures throughout the world that never lost this relationality,
Yeah,
this
for
sense
sure.
of multidimensionality. We're actually, when I say we, industrialize, materialistic, scientifically reductionistic minded people are the only ones that don't have this, don't accept this.
That is something that I think a lot of people of a Jungian persuasion are like kind of tiptoe around, right? Like this idea of like, are these agencies just parts of your own psyche? When well, like that's even a clear thing. Like, what does that even mean? But there, there seems to be this idea that you should absolutely look within and exhaust the possibilities within your own conscious mind and subconscious mind before you even start thinking about anything external. And I like and respect that up to a point, because I think, for all the reasons we were talking about before, right? Like, you start looking outside of yourself for reasons why this, that, or the other thing is occurring in your life, and you refuse to go into your own shadow material. You refuse to go into your own, pussy metaphysical warts, or whatever you need, like psychic warts, or whatever you need to do. But that doesn't also mean that there's not other agencies out there and we don't live in an ecosystem of beings. And trying to balance those two points, I think, is a very delicate, tricky thing to do. And I wonder how you do that personally and with like client
It's not
relationships
so
and stuff
tricky.
like that.
It's not so
Okay.
tricky. Okay, I take my cue from the Tibetans, but now living in Bali now 3 years, it's clear that they
Mm.
understand both live simultaneously. And what's so hard about it really, when we live, the idea is that for your own liberation, for your own spiritual path, if you don't work at the source in your own mind, then all is lost. Like, you haven't even begun, you haven't even gotten out of the gate. So yes, everything has to return home to your own perception and your own heart, your own intention. They're the primary driver. But it's not all just a projection. It's not just all a one unidimension of your expression of your mind. You live within a matrix, and that matrix includes other human beings. It includes the landscape, and includes this other multidimensional beings, network of beings. And so it works perfectly well. It works perfectly fine, and has done for thousands of years. And by the way, not just in Tibetan Buddhism, and not just in, I do believe the Greeks thought that that the gods were external agents,
Oh, for sure.
not
For
just the
sure.
way that we now retrospectively look back and go, oh no, they were propitiating in order to somehow do a placebo effect on their unconscious. No, no, no. That's a superimposition of a perspective that we would be comfortable with in order to understand the past.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a really interesting idea, I think, that connects these in an interesting way. And I'm sorry to everybody listening, but I'm going to bring this up yet again because it was one of those things that just absolutely has stuck with me ever since having this conversation. I had Dr. Jeffrey Kripal on the podcast, who you may know. He's pretty famous scholar of religion from Rice University, written a bunch of books, a lot of them on the paranormal, on psychedelic movements, on near death experiences. And he is a believer in these experiences. Like he thinks that they are truly occurring and that there's really something to this phenomenon, or all of these phenomena collectively. But he said something to me that was a really interesting sort of way to temper it, is that he takes the phenomena seriously, but not the image in and of itself seriously. So then I started going down this whole rabbit hole of like, what is the image presenter? What is it in you that is presenting the image? But then there's like a further like way to read this, and it's that the image is relational. And there's an amazing quote that it's just, give me a second to find it here, that speaks to this exactly. And it's from I think it's either from Proclus or Iamblichus, which are, they're both Neoplatonic sages who were doing theurgy, which is, the more I learn about Tibetan Buddhism, the more I'm like, man, like when you, if you really broke down what it is people are doing in something like a yidam practice and theurgy, it's kind of hard to distinguish any real core difference, because in theurgy, you're essentially doing devotional rituals to call forth a deity to like work through you, basically, to have some kind of relationship built with the deity. And this is the quote. The theurgist taught us long ago that the self-revelations of the gods necessarily happen in such a way that the formless take form and the shapeless take shape, with each soul receiving a firm and simple vision of the gods according to that soul's particular nature, with imagination providing form and shape to these visions. Each of these visionary participations retains the character of the participated, and the participant being somehow the intermediary for them. So it's like that there, the way I read that is that they're like, you and I could go through the same initiations and devote ourselves to like very similar ideas, but if we are successful in achieving a real result, even if that, let's say we connect with the exact same agency, to just use an agnostic word, I think my experience might be similar in quality to yours in some way, but it would still be unique to me, because my soul, my psyche, my whatever you want to call it, has its own weird way that that ephemeral thing interacts with it. and
For
and that's
sure.
just such a great, like, the fact that not only do you, like you said before, like that you live in a matrix of other beings, but that the way that those beings or agencies could and would manifest to you will be completely unique to you, and every single soul that's also true of. Like, that's such a brain melting idea.
I love it. And I love that you brought up that quote and that you're talking about a cross pollination or conversation across maps between Greece and India, because that's was a big inspiration for my book, and a big, um, I wish I had spent more time on it, because I was so deeply intrigued by this cross cultural exchange and this sense that there may actually be a nexus point somewhere in Kashmir or in Pakistan, where the Greco-Romans made contact with the early tantras, the Indian tantras, and then they
Yeah.
migrated to Tibet. So there is a link.
Hmm.
There is a historical link between these cultures, and they were both at probably around the same time exchanging ideas about these tantric power tools, and they do in fact feel very similar. They have a lot of crossover. Their ceremonies, their rituals, for example, the Gana chakra of the Tibetans, which come from the Indians, is a feast, is a Dionysian feast. It's a Bacchus,
Wow.
basically. And
Interesting.
yeah, and the sacramental use of psychedelic potions in the Vedic and early Indian tantric, the soma, the use of soma, and the use of kaikion in Greece, and
Yeah.
this idea that you're bringing forth about becoming a receptacle or of an agency. Yes. So early on in tantric practice, you have what's called the front view of the deity. You
Hmm.
generate you generate a placeholder of the deity, a form of the deity. Okay, let's say it's Green Tara, who is the emanation of altruistic or swift engagement. She's beautiful. She has one foot bent in samadhi, concentration, epic concentration of mind, and the other foot is bent forward to swiftly engage out of compassion in the world. So you do a frontal visualization of her and you invite her. You're basically creating a bridge, a placeholder where that, and by her vow, those that call upon her, she must meet.
Wow.
And so we're talking about, yes, there is Tara. Tara is out there. Tara is a thing. She's taken a vow. She has a backstory. She has a mythology. She has a particular energy. She has a particular utility in the pantheon of deities. And the first step is to call her and to see her and to beseech her and to create relationality with her. How do you do that? You propitiate, you all make offerings, you generate, and then you harmonize with her by chanting her
Yes.
mantra.
Yeah.
So the visualization is then charged with a vibration, a frequency. You chant her specific mantra. And what that does is that it puts you like two tuning forks into the same cadence.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can stop there at the lower level tantras, in which you're just, beseeching the guidance, beseeching the, asking for prayers, asking for blessings, asking for guidance, asking for signs, asking for support. You're doing something that welcomes her. You make offerings, you create a place for her, just as you would an invited guest at your house. You make dinner and you set a seat at the table, and then you invite. You do
Yeah.
that with the deities, and they do that every single day in Bali with the chanang, the basket of flowers and the incense in front of every restaurant, in front of every domicile, in front of every, particularly at the crossroads of every street. Every morning they're doing their beseeching, offering. Here's a little fruit, and then the deity comes. Then you can go further. Then you can use the deity form as a land bridge to invite or evoke the presence of Tara within, not just without. And one of the quickest, most effective ways to do that is to use your multi-sensory memory bank storage of your personal teacher as the land bridge, the psychic land bridge between deity world and your world.
Hmm.
And this is what's considered the single most effective hallmark of Tibetan Buddhist Tantra, is the Guru Yoga, which means that you use the deity and the mind, the living embodiment presence of your teacher, as a land bridge to connect with the deity inside of you. Why is that important? Because deity is, for some, still abstract or removed. It looks like a celestial agency. It doesn't look all
Yeah.
that human. It doesn't look all that relatable. It looks divine. But your guru, well, your guru you've had lunch with, you've gone on pilgrimage with, you've studied with, you know how they're smiling, how they're giggling, you know how they react to jokes, you know how they instantly reframe their mind around hardship and then inspire you to see the possibility. Their open-mindedness is palpable. Their energetics are buoyant. Their congruence with reality, their meaning, purpose, their drive is within reach. You can taste, feel, touch, and smell it. So you ask the guru to inhabit the form of the deity. Suddenly you have a land bridge so that you grow even closer to the deity's presence through your memory storage of what it's like to be with your guru. Suddenly Tara is Geshe Tenzin Zopa in Tara's exalted form.
Hmm.
My heartfelt human memory of being with Geshe Tenzin Zopa in his uplifted, creative, intuitive, humorous, available, is now amplified in the form of Tara with her specific archetypal impetus for swift engagement.
Yeah.
Then that's not the end. Then you build on that. Then through a series of visualizations, you imagine that both your guru in the form of Tara dissolve into nectars. You basically go through a process of internalization. You bring them into your own mind stream and they take up residency in the mandala at your heart. And what that is not just you see them there, but you feel them there. You feel their openness, you feel their vibration, you feel their curiosity, you feel their humor, you feel you now suddenly Tara and your guru are becoming inseparable with your own essence.
Mm. Yeah. It's it's so different than the way that we typically think about what a deity is and what it means to have a relationship with a deity. And I think it is in some ways important to point out that words like God or deity are like really limiting in some ways, and having long conversations like this I think are often required to really elucidate what we're talking about when we mean those words or when we say those words. And I love this practice because it points to this idea that these things don't need to simply be out there in some form or in there in some form or archetypal. It's everything. It's, you know, like a, I mean, to go to a tradition that I understand a little better, going to the Greek tradition, let's say, they are Jungian archetypes. They are agencies in the world that exist. I don't think they have like anthropomorphic bodies, but I think that there's still agencies out in the cosmos that are exerting some kind of force in all likelihood, and there are a panoply of them, and we are constantly in their energy, out of their energy to greater degrees, interacting with various energies. And the more that you can make yourself a vessel for those things to act through, the more I think you're not just spirit, like saying something like spiritual growth is so nebulous and unsatisfactory. It's like it's you are going through an alchemical transformation of being this meat suit, ego based, fancy animal to being something else, to being
Right.
hands for the guru with a capital G, like you were
Mhm.
talking about, which I think is, it couldn't be more clear that this is really the underlying spirituality that underlies all mystical traditions.
Mm.
It's it's slaying the dragon of the ego to a point where you can put yourself aside, your idea of yourself aside, so that something greater can work through you,
Mm.
or that you can grow into something greater that is informed by more than just your understanding of who you are and your worldly accomplishments. And that is not, some people say they want that, but I think you even have to work at wanting to want that. And that's what's beautiful about this type of spirituality that you're talking about, is it's like you are praying to take on more godly aspects within yourself that are already latent, because they are these archetypal things that you carry, but they're like slumbering. They need nourishment. They're like seeds that need watering.
Mm.
And the way that you water those is through action. It's and upkeep and maintenance and continued reorientation toward those things. It's not as simple as, what Campbell called something like monkey religions or something like that. I can't remember exactly what he called them, but he was pointing to this idea that, oh, you just do your capitalistic ego-based life 6 days a week. You go to the church 1 day a week, and then you do your little,
Mm.
monkey dance and pretend that that's no.
Mm.
Like there's something that really needs to be sacrificed in that initiation, in that transmutation from the mundane self to the spiritual self, or whatever you want to call it. And what you're talking about really points to that. um I feel like there's so much more I want to say about this topic, but I'm going to leave it at that. But one of the things I started saying, like, yeah, because I thought you were going to go into this, but you actually were talking about, you eventually got to this point, is that you kind of start, for lack of a better term, resonating on the same frequency as whatever this archetypal agency is, deity is, whatever, and you therefore become
Mm.
almost like another emanation of that very thing. And that reminds me, and taking another left turn here, that reminds me so much of what's being talked about now in this new wave of UAP shit. And I don't know if you've been following this at all, but like, have you been following the psionic assets thing at all?
Only through your podcast, but go ahead,
Uh,
give me a little primer.
yeah, yeah. So this main, there've been ideas like this in lore for a long time, but basically, this newer whistleblower, Jake Barber, has said, former special forces guy, really compelling credentials, says he was involved in crash retrieval for extraterrestrial or otherworldly or non-human origin um, vessels, basically. And the way that these things are attracted, Miles, is by doing something that doesn't sound too dissimilar from what you're describing. It's like these assets, who are, that they call them in air quotes, are these intuitively psychically gifted individuals that essentially project something like a loving kindness kind of signal in a very strong coordinated way. Like there are multiple of them on site, and this makes things appear,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah,
It is by occupying these states of consciousness so deeply and reaching out and requesting connection and
yeah,
receiving connection, and then somehow guiding these things that actually take, like, have a manifestation apparently, and then show up. And then the craziest part of it all is that apparently this is a coordinated thing that defense contractors are doing, like aerospace multi-billion-dollar military, or contractors are doing that with these psionic assets, and then downing these things and
yeah,
taking them.
yeah.
So yeah, it's crazy. That's the gist of the story. But yeah, I mean, it reminds me of that. Like that, but that may is there anything like this that you're aware of in the, I mean, not the sort of like more modern aspects of it, but is there anything like this in the Tibetan tradition or Tibet
Listen,
traditions
Michael, 1,000 years
that
ago, people saw angels in the sky.
right, of course, yes.
Okay, and the Tibetans, very devout, even today. The Balinese pray for, have relations, beseech all kinds of agencies. In fact, just Tuesday, 2 days ago was Nyepi here, which is the Balinese New Year based on the Balinese calendar. The day before Nyepi, they parade their Uga Uga, which are these demonic, they create out of paper mache. Every bunjar, every community creates these huge 5-story, demonic representations, and they parade them, and then they burn them in a ritual. But they believe in these demonic forces. They believe that it's important to acknowledge them and beseech them. And so, they are what we're talking about is being in relationship with something.
Yeah.
And what that actually looks like, it takes different forms, and especially takes different forms depending on the cultural context and the historic period.
Yeah.
But what's not in any question is that you're not alone here on this one-dimensional world. No, you're not. You don't. Once you fine-tune your orienting antenna, well, then the portal's open and all kinds of things happen. Now, I will say this. Maybe 95% of all this is bullshit. Okay, but does that surprise us? If I look in the spiritual world and I look what people are doing in spiritual world, like the New Age populist movement is bigger than any authentic spiritual movement. It's the biggest thing out there.
For sure. Yeah.
And I look at what they're doing out there, and not to bash Burning Man, but it's my go-to example every time. I think there's a very deep hunger in the human psyche to return to tribalism and ritual and spirituality and multidimensionality. And then there's this absolutely blindsidingly, layer of narcissism that coats it all. And it's and it has a tendency to be really, really superficial and grandiose.
No, I was going to say, like, the spiritual materialism and the spiritual egotism too is so, like, I don't have any, collective ill will toward the psychedelic movement or Burning Man as a whole. But within those communities, there is like deep spiritual narcissism, and this idea that there's somehow like your financial status and your spiritual development are somehow like inform one another in some real way, and I think that that's completely fucking misguided.
Yeah, we agree on that. And we don't have to go too deep into that, other than we just leave it there. But in this deeper conversation, like the visitations, the fact that the incidents, the uptick in incidents of UFO sightings recently, extrasensory perception cases, my own included, which I start with in the book. What I want to say is that there is a preponderance of these encounters and evidences that are nonsense.
Yes.
But that doesn't dismiss the 5% that are true. And when we get into that 5%, we have to be willing to accept that it's kind of a egocentric, narcissistic colonialism that overlays the world, that we're at the center of it all still, and that nothing else is out there.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, the indigenous cultures that have maintained our long lineages all agree that there's other things out there, but how do they end up appearing? I mean, it's a very complicated question, and it's not my area of specialty. You have had many, many more gifted guests who have spent a lot of time with this. Like, why do the UFOs appear this way since like 1940 or 1930, whereas in the Middle Ages they appeared a certain other way, and then back in times of Egypt and before that they appeared another way. Why do they appear that way is a really interesting question. What form do they take is a really interesting question. But I guess my point is we're now heading across a paradigm threshold, where, I mean, the more you spend time seeing yourself as an antenna and you see the world in multidimensionality, the more you're going to have quote unquote anomalies that don't fit into the old paradigm.
Totally.
And if we take a cue from some of these indigenous traditions, we can see that there's actually there's an optimal way to engage. And that we actually can become the recipient of insight and ingenuity. We can remember things that will actually be useful. We can solve problems that we'll need to solve. We will create technology based on those insights. So I think there's an upside to it if it's coming from the right place and it's not overlaid in this sensationalized way. It's very quiet. It's very personal. It's very humble. Maybe it has an import from some lineage that really speaks to and knows how to intervene and intersect and relate.
Yeah.
But listen, the Dalai Lama, I've said this on the show. I know I've said it in other places in the public that everybody loves the Dalai Lama. They think he's a great guy. They think he's cute. They give him a worldly Nobel laureate and all the rest of it. But the Dalai Lama has historically always intervened with oracles.
Yeah.
He's alive because the oracle told him exactly when the window of opportunity was to leave Tibet. And by the way, the Dalai Lama is, of the 14th in his succession, the largest exponent of the Kala Chakra Tantra, and initiating hundreds and thousands of people over the course of his lifetime into the Kala Chakra. Now, the Kala Chakra is the most complex, sophisticated mind science tantric technology the world has ever known.
Wow.
And he is the chief exponent of delivering that in his lifetime. I can't remember the actual numbers, but of the 13 predecessors, maybe they gave out one or two of these in a lifetime. The Dalai Lama has done dozens and dozens. Now, why is that happening? Well, it's very
Aquarian, isn't it?
It's very Aquarian, and it coincides with the Shambhala prophecy. And the Shambhala prophecy is celestial or cosmologically tied to a grander mythos of the time of turning out of darkness and towards the light, and that there is a very deep confrontation with the malevolent forces, external and internal, we are undergoing right now. And so he wants to empower people with discernment and altruism and the ability to use their central nervous system and the energy, the nuclear power plant that is embedded in our central nervous system. He wants us to engage in egalitarian social movements that aren't about religion, but more about unity. So the Kala Chakra is perfect for this time. But to your point, it's like maybe we have to become good students to learn how to understand our role within these networks and relations.
Totally. Yeah. The idea that you brought up earlier of just seeing yourself as an antenna is a really powerful one, because I think that no pun intended, pings on multiple frequencies. Like if you like remove your skin and your I'm not literally, don't do that. But if you have an internal view of your body, you really look like an antenna. There's all kinds of signals and chemicals and hormones and just shooting all throughout your body, communicating with one another. You have an electromagnetic field that comes off of your body. Like, obviously, anybody who's into this idea that consciousness is not an epiphenomenon of the brain talks about this idea that you're more of a receiver or antenna for consciousness than you are a creator for it. But why stop there, right? Why would you only be an antenna or receiver of consciousness? Like, you're in an ecosystem of all kinds of signals, man-made and otherwise. And I think understanding what we actually are and what we're actually capable of with our psyches, with our consciousness, I think we are absolute neophytes, 99.9% of people. And I mean, man, we haven't talked since I did my retreat at the Monroe Institute, but I mean, even just like spending a week doing really intensive meditation, you just have no idea what your psyche is capable of, what's in that labyrinth, totally on the natch. Like, just deep diving into your own psyche, what you're going to run into is mind-blowing. And that's in like a week of work. Now imagine a decade. Now imagine 2 decades.
And what's the lineage source of Monroe Institute? See, how far does it go back? How well
far.
How well congealed was their curriculum? You see, when I look at my teacher, Geshe Tenzin Zopa, he is the lineage holder of something on order of a 2,500-year-old lineage. His teacher spent 25 years in a cave. 25 years in isolation in a cave. The stories that I have been told about what the mind is capable of as a result of that kind, most people would flippantly dismiss as bollocks, absolute bollocks. But
like cities or
unbelievable cities, unbelievable psychic abilities, unbelievable actual transtemporal abilities that belie any kinds of reductionistic scientific boundaries. And why? Not for any other reason than to share love on this planet. You see, not for any fame. These hill-dwelling or mountain-dwelling yogis didn't get expensive Royal Royces out of this. Geshe Lama Konchog, who's the master of my teacher, for many years in that cave, lived on nettles alone.
Wow.
He used a practice called chulen, which is to alchemically transform nettles, or even said, because the altitude there, it's very, very, very high, very, very cold. And he was living in a cave at the time that didn't have any shelter. He was like living in a hole. And there was no food around, and the wind was blistering cold. And he was doing deep tumo, which is a practice of generating psychic heat, which I think Wim Hof has tapped into. but not necessarily seen that that technique is just one technique within a broader curriculum for the
Yeah.
purposes of gaining enlightenment, for the purposes of what? Of transforming the planet into a new bliss realm for the living beings, so that living beings are more able to tap their own enlightened potential. This is always the deeper mission. But he's in there in that cave practicing tumo against the elements, and if there's no nettles around that he can alchemically transform into fuel, he's transforming the wind and surviving on wind alone. Now, some people dismiss this as just nonsense. But my teacher has taken vows. He's a monk that's taken vows. He gets no benefit. He's not supposed to lie. He's not supposed to tell me fibs or stories. He's telling me real accounts. And when his teacher, Geshe Lama Tongkongchog, died, and they did the traditional of the, first of all, when these lamas die, they stay in meditative posture. They don't decay like a normal body.
Yeah, it's insane.
Okay, and then there are deep signs of the rainbow body achievement, which are discovered in the relics after the cremation. So the bones are fragments of the bones are found in the ashes, along with diamonds and pearls and minerals and other kinds of
What? Wow.
Yes. You see, and those relics are observable. They are. I've seen them. You know, the relics of Geshe Lama Konchok. You can see that that being wasn't just operating on a psychic level, that being transformed the very infrastructure of the body. And then this comes back to his main practice was Vajra Yogini, the diamond queen, yidam. And the highest stages of that yidam practice are not just to transform your perceptual set so that you see the world from the vantage point of the deity at the center of the mandala, but that you actually transform your body into the deity.
Wow.
And I mean, this coarse body, you can actually transform into the body of the deity, which is hyper subtle. They're talking about making a body of light. Now, if I mean, that's they're talking about becoming an angel, Michael. And I'm no longer suspicious. I'm more suspicious of the scientific reductionistic paradigm that says that you're basically just chemistry on your way to the abyss of death. I'm more suspicious of that than I am of high civilization technology that knew how to convert the raw material of an egocentric being into an angel.
That's a quote you're only going to get in this conversation.
Only with you, my friend. Only in the mind meld.
Exactly. That's so crazy, man. Yeah, I mean, that reminds me that there's this amazing quote that from I've probably said it to you before. I've said this a million times on the podcast too, by Mary Louise von Franz about Jung, where she's saying something incredibly similar to what you're saying, where she's talking about basically the linchpin of Jung's entire philosophy was really about transmuting yourself into some kind of fully realized immortal version of yourself in that sort of, you know, that adage that you and I both love about how if you like the one about if you die before you die, then you won't die when you die.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I fully understand what that means or how to achieve that, but basically every mystical tradition throughout the ages has had this idea that there is some kind of self-realization or second birth that can occur that is not metaphorical.
Yes.
Like it's a very real metaphysical gestation and hatching of something that occurs. And I don't know what that meant. Like I must drive home. I don't know what that means or how to achieve that necessarily. But in all of these things, including these stories that you just mentioned, it seems like there's just copious amounts of literal examples of this thing occurring.
Yeah. I mean, it's still a rare, even in Tibetan tradition. It's not like everybody
No.
ascends to that level of complexity and refinement. But it certainly is for those who are initiated. It is known to be the pinnacle of achievement, and it's not, and it is revered. It is regarded as a real possibility, something to aspire for. And again, you have to have the three principal paths underneath it. I mean, without renunciation, altruism, and correct view, you can't even begin to dip your waters in the tantric methodology. But at its most complete expression, achieved by very few, but still possible,
Mm-hmm.
still possible. It's not just overcoming fear of death as one might in one psychedelic session, or some very deep near death experience that then, I've talked to people who've had near death experiences and seen their spirit raise out of their body and hover to the ceiling and see themselves from a vantage point above, and then or the tunnel of light phenomenon, in which they have a choice point between freedom or coming back to the planet, coming back into embodiment. Those people, those are true experiences. Okay, they are real experiences. But it's not just the courage or the fearlessness or the sensibility that you have overcome the fear of death. There's this extra little bit where the actual matter that you're made with can be transformed. And of course, these are the reports of the Christ.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're the reports of these high lamas. And they're probably the reports in the Hermetic tradition of these very few high realized sages or masters. I guess what we're coming into with the Aquarian age is a remembrance that, given the right initiatory circumstance or context or training, this is a possibility for anyone. Anyone can be the Christ. Now, I'm not saying anyone flippantly, like I can tell you how I see myself as never being able in this lifetime. I've just dipped my toe in it and I look at the distance between myself and my teacher. It's not going to happen for me, but it doesn't make me any less receptive and revering of that possibility. And certainly the suspicion is gone. There's no holds left inside of me that says that's not a possibility. And I guess part of our conversation about entertaining these things is the more that you fine tune your antenna to tune into these frequencies, opportunities, experiences, the more you're going to see them. The more that you're going to see them. The more open-minded you are, the more that scientific reductionistic paradigm that closes doors will begin to dissolve. What does that inevitably allow for? It lets in all kinds of multidimensional experiences. It allows them to come in, including these legitimate high-level experiences or reports, along with the deluge of nonsense. And it's up to us to sort through it.
Yes. Yeah. And that is where you really need to lean into your own personal experience. That's one of the takeaways that I always want to bring these conversations home with, is that believe the fanciful stories, don't believe them. At the end of the day, you have to have some kind of practice that you're going into full force and see what it's like for yourself, and then use that blade of discernment that Miles is talking about to really know what is real, what is illusion, what is dream, what is whatever. And that's the real work. And if you start doing that real work earnestly, I don't want to make it sound like it's super easy for just mind-blowing, visionary, life-altering things to happen. It does take work, and I'm disappointed all the time, right? Like, I always want to have some kind of like mind-blowing mind meld with my own daimon or whatever, and it's like it's never shows up the way that I fantasize about it showing up. But crazy shit has happened to me. I'm not going to get all into my out of body experience again, and or ayahuasca experiences or whatever, but those things can happen. And they can happen when you least expect them to happen if you're dedicated to a practice, if you put yourself in the right situations, if you take the risk to go on, why shy away from being mythopoetic at this point? Go on the hero's journey, whatever vernacular you want to use. And
And they're
maybe
going
on
to
that,
happen more
yeah,
and more. I mean, we're also crossing a paradigm. We're crossing a civilization in the collective. To return to where we started with in the beginning,
yeah.
the collective is transforming. Pam Grenberg puts it this way that, even down to the cellular and the frequency of our DNA, we're upgrading because we are on the upswing of the celestial 25,000 year period. We're now on the upswing, as according to the research by Bibhu Des Mishra, who's a scholar of the Vedic Yuga system. His book recently came out called Yuga Shift. His new calculations puts us coming out of the Kali Yuga on March 21st, 2025. Okay,
Whoa.
that's several weeks ago. Now, the Kali Yuga in the 25,000 year cycle is the zenith of the dark age of humanity. In these long cycles, it's a descent and an ascent of consciousness in which high civilizations fluctuate. We have just crossed over, according to his recent calculations. And in my book, I use another set of calculations that put that crossing over about 300 years ago. But in the long scheme of things, 25,000 year period, we are in the early stages of a new phase of human existence, and what we will see is that more and more of us will have these kinds of paranormal psychic experiences, and that we shouldn't be dismissive of them because something is happening actually in our DNA, and something is happening both externally as the paradigm dissolves, but something is actually happening. And, the other day I put it this way. I don't know if you feel this, but because everything is accelerating and everything is so overwhelming and you're feeling bewildered and the tectonic plates beneath your feet are all constantly shifting and there's no new ground anymore. Everything is quick movements and spontaneous arisings of events and things you didn't expect. And
Yeah.
somehow I came up with this idea that just like when you travel abroad and you have jet lag, your system is undergoing a kind of recalibration of its circadian rhythm, that as a species, we are now crossing over in the very fiber and cellular level of our being is going through a jet lag period where we're fatigued and overwhelmed, but we're actually upgrading. And what that upgrade or that software upgrade, the upside of it is that the veils will be ever more thinner for us. We'll have contact. We're being positioned or primed to actually take in new inputs. And so with those input channels will be more psychic experience, maybe in the form of more visitation, maybe in the form of more dream, maybe in the form of more lucidity, maybe in the form of more premonition. All that stuff that you did at the Moreau Institute, it's naturally happening to our species. We're naturally growing, part of our natural evolution. Now, if you can take on board initiatory practices that help you harness that capability, then all the better. But I just think I'm kind of sensing that that's what the movement is. There's something actually changing in the human species. And what that will do is it will actually shapeshift the world that we build and the way that we interact. For better and for worse, all right? I mean,
yes, right.
for better and for worse.
Amen, brother. It's been way too long. This has been a true pleasure, as it always is. Very excited about your new book. It goes on sale when?
Tomorrow.
Really, literally tomorrow.
Literally
when you said
tomorrow.
The Eve, you meant literally.
Yeah, no.
That's crazy.
1st of April. Return of Elixir is here. 1st of April. You can grab your copy at whatever bookstore that you are inclined to. I just want to plug that in the month of May, I'm inviting a series of great luminary teachers to join me in a series of month-long dialogues around the Elixir themes. Those themes are psychedelics, pilgrimage, the shadow, the soul, astrology and cosmology, archetypes, the unconscious, all the ones that Michael and I love to riff on. I'll be engaged in great dialogues in the month of May during the Elixir Festival. So I hope that people can join me there.
Love that, man. Yeah, and if you want to take the energy of this conversation forward into something, that would be a great thing to do. Thank you so much, my friend.
You
Let's
too,
wrap this
Michael. Love
one.
you. Much love.
Love you too, man. Thank you.